Okay, I have 3 o'clock and I will call the meeting to order. Mary, would you read the governor's remote policy, please?
Yes, this open meeting of the Town Area Plan Work Group, a subcommittee of the Nantucket Planning and Economic Development Commission, is convening via Zoom video conference pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. This meeting is being recorded. Please be aware that other people may be able to see you, and take care not to share your device's screen. Anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording. This meeting will feature public comment if any members of the public are present and wish to offer a comment. Henry, do you want to do the roll call?
Yes, thank you. Mary.
Here.
Lee.
Here.
Marcia.
Here.
Mary Ann.
Here.
And I don't see Allison, Reagan, or Mickey. Okay, we have an agenda, or a quorum, excuse me. Okay, approval of the agenda. Any comments, changes? I take that as a no. Motion to approve.
So moved.
Mary, a second.
Second, Mary Ann.
Mary Ann, second. All in favor, aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Okay, we have an agenda. Approval of the draft minutes from September 15th. Any discussion?
Henry, I have an apology to make. It's really quite simple. As I was watching the video, I got so engaged in what was going on, I fooled myself into thinking I was there. And every so often, there was something to which I could add. And so I did. I sent a note, no matter to whom. I'll get to that later. And so I want to reassure people that even though I was thus engaged, what I wrote in the minutes is meant to follow faithfully what I saw on the video. And when we get to old business, I'll give a little more explanation. I don't want to cut into Amy's presentation.
Okay. Any more discussion? Okay. Motion to approve then?
Motion to approve, Mary Ann.
Mary Ann, second.
Second, Marcia.
Marcia, seconds. All in favor, aye.
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 Opposed?
And Mickey Rowland has joined us.
All right. Hi, Mickey.
Hi, everybody.
Okay. Where was I? We have a minutes approval. Good. All right. With this, I will introduce Amy Baxter, who really doesn't need any introduction.
I can go many ways. Thank you. So I think I said it as I said in the email. I just wanted to kind of make sure I understand what your questions are and what information you need to know. I don't have a specific presentation because I want to make sure I understand the conversation that led to me and how I can kind of help further it along. And I can certainly share things as I understand what you need to know. So happy to talk about anything. I think you mentioned pop-up shops and that. Start there.
Yes, please.
Okay. So
Amy, let me ask you a quick question before.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the boundaries that the town area plan is designed to cover? Should I put that on the screen? Is that helpful for you, or?
Yes, because I wasn't familiar with what your goals are or things. There's a lot of meetings going on out there that I'm not quite sure what you're looking to cover. So I'd actually like to learn more about what you're doing. Yes.
Okay, so that should be on the screen. Hopefully you're seeing the map.
Yep.
And the key point there is we do not include the downtown commercial core or the waterfront. We're essentially the residential area of roughly the old historic district, but not exactly. So that
Okay.
the actual plan boundaries are outlined on the map for reference.
Okay, so as we go into Mid-Island, Liberty, okay, so what
Maybe the
would
boundary is Bear Street.
Bear Street, okay. I see that. What would be your, main goal as far as what you're looking to accomplish as far as with your group, would you say?
Well, so the NPNEDC is responsible for creating area plans, which are
Right.
done in collaboration with the residents or occupants of that area.
Okay,
One of the focus areas is the question of business services and whether more businesses are desired or any changes in businesses. And so Allison King and I were the two that were focusing on the question about businesses. And so we ran a survey and asked respondents, are there businesses you would like to see in the area? And we got some suggestions, and we also got some people saying no more business in the area. And as you would expect, a variety of opinions.
yes,
And so we thought, well, we really ought to better understand what is allowable in the area. What is the process that somebody would have to go through if they were opening, for instance, a retail store or a restaurant or a lodging establishment in the residential area of the whole historic district. So that was kind of the first question that we had was,
Okay.
what's available already and what's involved in that. And then there are other focus areas that other people represent. They may also have permit questions, parking
Right.
permits, and you're the permit queen. So we wanted to,
Yeah.
to have you tell us what should we know as we contemplate either any changes to regulations or knowing that certain things can't be changed, I guess is the way.
Right. Well, okay, let's see where I should start and where I should try not to get myself into trouble here with what I'm going to say. But so I'll start with as far as businesses, people wanting to open a business in different locations. So as far as permits and licenses right now, the main focus of what we really give a license to tends to be in the food and beverage, hospitality area. Obviously, liquor is a huge focus as to what I do because we have 106 liquor licenses, which is extreme in the high season. And if you look at retail businesses, we do not currently have a permit or license specifically for that category, though it's something I've looked into for years. I know town administration has been interested in doing a general business license. And then the pandemic hit, so we haven't gotten back to it. It's something I hope to get back to this winter. Provincetown and some other folks I've talked to have it. It wouldn't be something that would be cost prohibitive in any way. It'd probably be a $50 fee at most. But to bring those types of businesses, license retail and that type of shop, so that we could better communicate the regulations we have now, some of which would be specifically to retail and these pop-up shop things that you were asked about, would be display of wares and things of that sort.
Amy, I
Yeah.
apologize for bouncing in like this.
No problem.
What about the in-between area? That is to say, in between restaurant and retail, like takeout food. Is that licensed or not?
So it would be under, and I'm actually changing this because we've only really done a common vicular, which is seated food service. So I'm trying to add a takeout as a category, but it is permitted. There's sub permits to a license. So say common vicular liquor, they have sub permits, which will be health, which is the big one, COIs, if it's building, fire inspection. So they have to do all those things, any sort of zoning review, things of that sort until they get the license. So we are the end of the day. Can you pull this map down? It's easier for me to see people. I think when I speak, I got a gist of what the map is.
There you go.
Thank you. So When we talk about takeout too, that in the downtown area I know as well, and I don't know zoning, word by word, but that's allowed by right down in that downtown area. So there's no, parking requirements for that as well. So, but that would be common vicular with no seating. So takeout with food permits and things of that sort. So we do kind of get involved in that and hope to more. Retail wise, again, pop-up shops and things of that sort, as long as they're located in a brick and mortar, it's not a problem. What we have a problem with are folks that, and this is what is really popular now, is some sort of mobile retail unit. Like we have mobile food units, which are not allowed in the downtown core district, but are now categorized as takeout. We've also had a lot of inquiries about mobile retail units, whether it be truck, carts, things of that sort. And that tends to be something we go after, not as much lately, but certainly pre-pandemic had issues with even brick and mortar stores putting carts out on the sidewalks and things like that, and having vendors. Town Pool did it a lot. They'd have vendors come in. One day I had to take out an underwear cart literally on the street, on Main Street and stuff. So those things pop up on the streets, and that tends to be where our focus is. I just got a request for a downtown shop that has an outdoor patio that wants to extend sales to that patio, which I don't believe is allowed. So things of that sort come out. We've had issues with people hanging t-shirts and stuff like that. So again, it's visual clutter and things of that sort that we tend to deal with as far as pop-up shops. But again, if there's, yeah, go ahead.
So we were thinking, for instance, in the residential area, there's a history of small mom and pop, not pop-up, but mom and pop shops that have closed, right, over time. And it's there's also been, of course, a history of home businesses, so crafters and that sort of thing. And so what I'm kind of hearing from you is that they wouldn't be able to really show their wares in a public setting, even if it was their front porch or their garage or anything like that, that would be prohibited.
I would think, again, and I see Lee, your hand up there. I believe per chapter, I pulled it up for myself on it, that it is the downtown core district, but I think it is on any town street, sidewalk, or on the exterior of any commercial structure, building, warehouse, or other establishment, whether the same is offered for sale, all that sort of situation. So that's part of that the town kind of looks at. I think a lot of that is a zoning question too, about home businesses and where they're located. I think zoning's probably a big part of that in that district that you're working on right now. So that's kind of where I start with something like that, because we don't.
If it will help, I can display page 2 of the use chart where nothing is permitted.
Right. If nothing's permitted, then yeah, nothing's permitted there. So, our focus tends to be on the downtown core and the Mid-Island district, where most of those are. So if something popped up like that, and if it's something that we license, like food and that sort of thing, generally zoning is the zoning enforcement officer is what gets involved as far as approving or denying those locations. We get involved even in that district. Mobile units are a big deal. Events and things of that sort are the types of things that we would get probably involved in permitting outside of that main downtown area, if that makes sense. So are you getting requests and stuff in that area for businesses and such?
No, I think we were just exploring conceptually how to make the neighborhood more vibrant.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to walk to things instead of having to drive to things. So, just that sort of neighborhood development of having more things, in your neighborhood instead of driving to the Mid-Island area or, some other area.
If it'll help, Mary, we look historically, when there were very few cars and even fewer horses on island, everybody walked. And as a result of that, when I first got here, there was a package store called Riders. Um, Rabimbus was up on Pleasant Street, the bake shop. And then I was told that round about 60 or 65 Orange Street used to be a small convenience store. We add into that the restaurants, Ships Inn and Woodbox and American Seasons. And they are pre-existing non-conforming, but they reflect what was part of our history. And so I'm speaking for myself, Mary, but I think I'm reflecting what I heard in the group. If that kind of vitality can be restored without harming the nature of our neighborhood, we might be in favor of it.
I would say too, and interesting, those pre-existing non-conforming, I didn't think about that even with American Seasons, but what I deal with on a daily basis, neighbors. And, you know, even in the downtown district, most recently, Brotherhood, people who bought a house next to something that was been there for 40 years, do not want noise of any kind. So trying to, you know, start to put stuff in neighborhoods, let me tell you it's daily sometimes with some of these folks. And in this situation, you know, the person bought a house literally here and the hood to the restaurant is here and wants to know who to complain about the hood being too loud for the restaurant. But did you not?
Or you just froze.
So things like that, people are just, it seems like, yeah, that's great, but not in my neighborhood. So I'd be surprised to see support for extending any businesses into some of these neighborhoods, because it just seems they're, even when they move into a neighborhood where it exists, they don't want it, or they don't want it to make noise. So that's kind of been my experience lately. And I don't mean to be negative in that, but it is a big deal all the time, something that we're dealing with right now. So it's a big consideration when we do new restaurants and things of that sort. So again, I think did you ask a question about as far as what some of these folks have to do to open these types of businesses?
Yeah, and maybe the answer is they can't. I know. But yeah, that would be instructive, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, this is a project we're working on. I'd like to see happen ASAP as far as a business guide for folks, because there's so many different departments and things that need to kind of come together. It's so confusing, I think, for some folks. They'll start obviously zoning, making sure that that's an allowed use, and then they go through planning and all of that. And then I use the meat and fish as an example. Went through that for 2 years and all of that back and forth, and then said, okay, we're ready for our liquor license. We said, no. So the select board had said no to something like that because of the amount in that neighborhood already. So trying to get a place where they communicate with the right folks up front and understand all the elements that come into some of these things, I think that's where we're lacking. So we have that pretty much laid out as far as restaurant, food service and such. Retail, again, mostly on zoning in the area, if there's any parking requirements. As far as a license, they don't specifically have one right now. They would obviously need a DBA certificate and things of that sort. But it is limited as far as a license right now. And again, we'd like to change that a little just to tie all these pieces together, because we have such a turnover that people don't automatically understand display of wares, do not understand a lot of our policies in this town. And I think that's what we're looking to do, is to help communicate that and help give them a process by which they go through. There's a lot of inspections that we don't do. I think of some of these places that galleries like to have openings and like to have alcohol, and all the retail shops want to have alcohol every week and things of that sort that we're dealing with. And by law, we're supposed to be inspecting those fire and building and things of that sort. And we just do not have the capacity to keep doing that. So we're trying to come up with a program that allows them to do that once in a while, but doesn't overwhelm the system. So I think that's something that needs to be done, that we're working on, at least to help that communication right now.
That sort of leads to another question, and that is, if you have, I'm going to try and avoid using the words that I want to use at the end. You have a gathering of merchants for a short period of time. Is that a store or is it an event? And is it different for event permitting? You know, like the sustainable market, if we wanted to do that in another location for whatever reason, is that a different kind of permit than the kinds of permits that you'd need to have a store?
Well, it depends again on what's being sold. As of right now, if it were involving food or packaged goods of any kind, that becomes a thing, because there's temporary food permits when you mix any sort of food preparation, or if you had multiple vendors dealing with food, that's where that would come in. If it was, I think they call it, stores that have trunk shows that bring in different types of retail providers, into a brick and mortar. Again, I'll use Town Pool, and some of the retail shops in Old South do it a lot. They have the basic brick and mortar, and they have a couple folks come in and display within the store or something like that. But other than that, if it's just retail type of goods, that's not something to be consumed. No, they're doing a lease sort of situation. It impacts us if there's any sort of use of sidewalk, but that tends to just be right now bikes and restaurants. So again, since we're mostly involved interior type of buildings, it's just a lease. And if they want to do a short-term lease, it just depends again if they're doing any major renovations that require inspections or any sort of food service. Otherwise, or if it requires parking, otherwise, not really. There's not a limit on that. Again, I
where that's kind of what pop-up shops would be looking
right.
at. There's no food or alcohol involved, and they have permission from the landowner for the building or the yard or whatever space they're in, and they're not on the sidewalk. Then there's not a lot restricting them, I guess, is what I'm asking.
If they're not doing any, renovations to the building, again, proper egress and exits and things, of that sort. Again, though, I would refer to making sure with planning and zoning, if there's any sort of restrictions in there. I think about the, if you have too many outlets, what they call that, franchises and stuff like that, if that would get triggered, if anything like that came up. But obviously we have others here that probably don't qualify for that as well. So I tend to lean into planning and zoning in some of those as far as the use. And then any building code as far as, any excessive turnover. But again, I mean, it's something to think about if we consider a general business license. That would be actually a good point to consider if there's any sort of conditions or term limits or seasonality to a permit of that kind. But it's something we can consider moving forward, actually. Yeah.
Once again, to Mary and everybody else, the use chart for R1, R5, and ROH does not permit retail in those districts.
Yeah, so I think that answers.
I'll put a copy of that in the minutes.
I have a
Yeah.
question though, because people find ways around it. And here's an example. How about a business that's a concierge service, doesn't really need brick and mortar, but they use their house and they do all their business with their quote employees via telephone, but employees come and go all day needing parking. So they are using up parking. They are parking on people's lawns and that sort of thing, where adequate parking was not provided for a business. So what about that?
Yeah, again, that's going to be a use situation, and that's Actually, I set up categories for us to determine as far as business licenses, but home-based businesses is something that would probably just go through planning as far as use. I don't know if we would get involved in a permit for that type of situation. I would just be looking into, as far as what we permit, is any retail type of operation, anything providing goods or services, or just goods really, merchandise or food and beverage to the public. Personal services of that sort, whether it be salon, health, or home-based business, would be more in the planning, in some cases health, as far as that is concerned, especially if it's a residence. They do.
So there's no
inspection
one to really
work.
there's no one to really complain to about that. If cars are coming and going all day long because there's a business, that's really a business there.
Yeah, I would say I would start on that one. I would start probably Marcus, zoning enforcement officer, if it is a business and if that is a violation of the use of that neighborhood. And then, of course, if it's traffic or parking situation, obviously, police can get involved if there's, any sort of issue in that situation. But again, if it's from a business, I generally start with zoning enforcement officer on that situation, because we have no license that we can really apply in that situation unless they were doing something. Of course, we're getting into the, I don't even want to go down this road. I've been down this hole all day, but in the rental car situation, which is similar to Uber and all these others, where all these businesses are online, and are they running a business out of their home? And in that situation, they're running a business out of their home, but they're violating the actual bylaw, where they're renting something and we don't have rental car medallions available. So that's a situation of a lot of home-based businesses, but we don't have the legislative support or any sort of legal avenues, in a sense, to do that. So it's difficult. If they were announcing their business as being at their home location and in a place that people can go to, or that they identify that location as a business, then that's a zoning situation. But right now, when we're dealing with this specific situation, I don't know where most of these people are. We're talking like 200 people or 100 people doing this, and it's trying to find them because the online marketplace it's hard to do that. So we're struggling with that. And, legal counsel is as well saying in some of those situations, peer-to-peer stuff and things of that sort, it's hard to go after yet until legislation catches up with it. So there's a lot of examples of that going on right now too, I imagine. So proving their business too and stuff, if there's no address, it's a brave new world out there, and it's whack-a-mole all day long, honestly. So
but I would just like to say that I think what landed many of us into this discussion was wanting to be able to hearken back to an earlier time in our area, to the walkable community, to mixed use, to live work situations that happily existed. People had candle factories in their backyard. I mean,
right.
In my yard, there was a school in the backyard, and then that turned into a shoe factory. There were amazing things. And so I know we started with talking about being able to grandfather in now defunct but earlier businesses established in our neighborhoods, just to begin to get that revitalization, because, as we go through the seasons in our particular area, you can have neighborhoods that are completely dead because nobody's living there in January or February, and so I understand what we're talking about. We're very contrary about wanting, but we don't want the noise, we don't want the cars. And so, what's it going to be? Because there are plenty of shops, retail shops in the downtown, all along Center Street, which they don't have individual parking lots. So how fair is that? So I just think, I understand cars are a problem, but I mean, it's just something that in the area that we're working on trying to come up with some valid situations that we can support, recommend, so forth in the plan. And so far, it's really hard.
Right. Yeah, I think about in that area too, and my mom lives in that kind of area. I know now that we have Mike Burns back in transportation planner too and stuff, and I feel like we have to somewhat start there too in a lot of ways as far as opening up safer avenues for people to use things like bikes and other things. I think we need to start dealing with that. I know he's working on a paid parking plan again, for which we've done a million times, but is on the agenda. And I also have a lot of, and here's something else that could be other places, but I got a call about renting so scooter things. And so I said, to the town, we got to deal with that, the electric bikes, things of that sort, make some safe pathways for people to get other neighborhoods. I live at Noshoff. I'm not going anywhere near downtown. Once the bike path ends, it's taking your life into your hands. Our bike path has been horrible all summer with all of these things flying everywhere. So I think that's a big deal, something to think about too, to get people out of their cars, but to make safer pathways to get to some of these neighborhoods. Because I'm terrified, like to walk the dog these days with all these things flying around. So I kind of feel like, and I said this to the town, I said it when we were dealing with the pedicab thing, and it wasn't that I was against pedicabs, but I'm like, we need to figure out how to deal with what we have. Stop adding all these things. How do we make things safer? Okay, what do we have? What do we need to deal with? Let's get to a plateau here. And trust me, I want it. I've been here since the early 80s, my family. I want to bring some of that back. I want to, preserve that in some way. I feel like we need to really assess what we have and what we need to do to make that stuff work before adding. You know what I mean? Like some of those options, because it's a lot. It's a lot for us to deal with, and to be adding businesses when we're having trouble dealing with the ones we have. That would be my biggest concern, and my biggest thing is that I want to work on integrating all of these things that we have. Because what I get hit on every day is people who, quite honestly, want to come and skim off the top and think there's a right to have, put your hand into the big pot of gold that's Nantucket. And I just need to open a business and it'll just be great and everything will be wonderful. And then they realize how much work there is to it, right? So it's trying to halt that a little bit and kind of integrate what we have in the community. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do. But without saying stop the growth, but it's
Amy, I've got a question about liquor licenses.
Oh, good.
Did I read that either in the select board or in your office that there was consideration of asking holders of seasonal licenses to go year round?
Well, that's been a question we've been trying to figure out without doing a home rule petition. So the struggle we have, and we haven't done anything specific, we're trying to make it so that the annuals that we do have do not go to seasonal, because we're so hard and push so hard on making them stay open 12 months a year. It's impossible for most of them, right? Years ago, they worked together and had, varying times that they were off, but they knew enough people were on. The Restaurant Association has gone away. We're trying to encourage that to come back. Right now, a seasonal license is April 1st to January 15th. We can shorten that to make it a little bit stricter to allow for more people to be annuals, because we have some folks that maybe 1 March, they're able to be open. Sometimes they can't, but right now that option's not available to them. We created a fee that would be for someone who was an annual and closed more than 2 months, 60 days, to encourage them to stay open, but it's not enough. It's not, they're just going to say, fine, I'll just be a seasonal. I have a couple now, I'm asking them to hold on to be an annual to encourage them at least be open, because if we keep pushing it, we're going to have nothing open in January and February except a handful of things. So we've struggled with, and I've talked to attorneys about this, is can everyone just be annual? We can tier fees based on how much they're actually open, because it changes year by year. So we have half and half. We have more annuals, I think, than seasonals. It's split almost down the middle as far as maybe 54 to 52.
So,
But
Amy, I think we're getting a little far from the topic of the town area plan, and I
yeah,
know your time is limited. Lee, you had made some suggestions about changing parking permits with the residential permits. Do you want to ask Amy anything about that?
Sure. If we consider resident parking permits,
mhm.
do you deal with those, Amy?
Yes, we sell those. My staff sells those downstairs. Yes.
Okay, because one suggestion for dealing with parking is to make our area entirely permit controlled, and that if you want to park in our area, you have to have a permit, and that would then, if the permit, whether it's a digital or a sticker on the bumper, would allow people to park downtown 30 minutes by the post office, or 2 hours, or 1 hour, or whatever. But without the permit, they would have to um, pay a daily fee. So the idea is to marry some notion of paid parking and permitted parking so as to make it easier for residents and yet not chase away visitors.
Right. So a couple things, depending on how the paid parking situation goes, that's unknown right now. So I wouldn't know how that would marry up with the 30 minutes. Right now, obviously, those with the residential parking permit, it's only in 2-hour zones. We'd like to at some point go to a neighborhood situation like Boston, because a lot of people use them to park all over the place instead of just in their neighborhood. So we tend to write the street down on it so we can determine if people are, parking on the other side of town with that residential parking permit. So that's something you can propose an extension of, if you wanted to take a look at those parking regulations. We've had, Sunset Hill, I think, did so, to extend it to their street because of certain parking issues there. It doesn't have to come from us. It would go through the select board. And I think it'd have to go to traffic safety first. But those are things you can certainly work on as far as that. I'd like to see some changes. It's kind of crazy when we're trying to deal with things. We get a lot of people that aren't truthful about actually living in a certain location because it's actually a store. We've had real estate agents lie about someone actually living somewhere. It's been kind of a mess where I think it needs to be a little bit more like 2 per resident, and anyone else, if they're renting, has to be a daily permit, but haven't come up with that exact thing. But I would encourage, writing through that and seeing if there's some things you can propose. But as far as paid parking, we got to see how that plays out right now. But
I'm familiar with a lot of what you're saying. I'm a graduate of a college in Montana, and I understand Montana license plates. And so when I saw 3 Discovery Land Rovers with sequential license plates from the smallest county in Montana, I went, gee, I ought to go say hello to this guy. Turns out he's one of our illicit rental car businesses.
Yeah, that sounds like it. Yeah, exactly. So that is what we're dealing with a lot of. And it's at the point where my staff is like being detectives, especially May and June, going through, proof of residency. And then you have folks with leases. And I know most of the leases are fake, or, they're just doing it up to get the permit. So, we have it now 2 for a certain price, and then you can buy up to 4, but the other 2 are going to be $250 or $500 a piece. So we increase the rate significantly, but there's a lot of jockeying going around and daily permits, and I'd like to see that tightened up, and the hotel spaces that they get, the passes, I'd like to see that tightened up. So kind of working on that, but I definitely encourage you can certainly submit any sort of request of that sort to the select board in your meetings if you determine there's something you think would work for that. So I know that with Sunset Hill, there was it took a bit to get some extension, I think, there, because we keep extending. There's going to be permits for the whole island. It's going to be, where do we stop? So, but that would go through the select board ultimately for
So,
that.
Mickey or Marcia, any questions from your areas for Amy?
A lot of what we're talking about at the moment is really fun, is controlled mostly by zoning. Amy's doing permitting, but it's got to go through zoning first before she even looks at it. So,
yeah, it has to be an allowed use. So it sounds like you're in a no allowed use area. So that I wouldn't get involved unless someone was violating that. For sure. So, but you might not want to allow some of those uses based on what we're dealing with downtown as it is. So is there any sort of information on actual businesses I can provide you, or lists or anything that can help you see kind of what we have? So I've started to put together databases of everything we have and all the licenses. So certainly
if we send you the map, are you able to tell us how many licensed businesses are within the mapped area?
Sure.
And working with Nathan, who can maybe give you a better version of it, but that would be a really helpful thing, is because we can kind of remember the ones that we're aware of, but
right,
it would be nice to have a more definitive list. And in particular, we weren't sure about the home occupations, how to count them as businesses or as not businesses.
But like I said, we're not tracking that quite yet. At least I'm not.
I think there was a question about, and you kind of touched on it, mobile businesses. So, whether it's a mobile dog grooming salon, or now you're talking about mobile retail and food trucks. Is there any, I think that I remember that you had, if they were going to be stationary, they had to have permission and a permit. But is there any way to regulate commercial traffic in a residential area? And we were thinking beyond just the mobile businesses, but also things like landscaping trailers and contractors and the people who are doing business in an area, but at a residence, and obviously you need to, but what is the impact, and what is what are the controls that are available, if any?
Yeah, and we did get something similar, so a dog grooming business request too. And again, I think it would start in zoning and planning, but my question always is, okay, are you going to provide a service at a private home, outside of food and beverage and alcohol? Fine, I won't get involved. It's when and even a mobile food unit someone would hire for a wedding, for food, as long as it's, paid by the host and only serves those invited guests, we don't get involved. But when it's stationary or serves the public or draws the public in or serves the public passing by, then we start to get involved as far as they're operating a commercial activity in that location. But if someone pays for a service to have their dog groomed, and someone has a truck for it or gets their car detailed and they drive to the neighborhood with I know parks out here, car detailing truck. But as far as restricting that, probably over at planning to start with, and then I don't know if traffic safety and all that would get involved as far as specific neighborhood if it wasn't a private neighborhood. But yeah, again, I tend to look at, is the public being served or invited in any way, and then we'll jump in for that.
That's a key point. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Do the math. Anything else you coming up?
I'm afraid I have to get going to the HTC, so I'm going to have to take off. But
have fun.
Thank you.
Marsha or Marianne, anything from either of you?
I can't think of anything.
Yeah, I would encourage, again, zoning or Marcus or even Mike Burns too, as far as some of those transportation issues. Now that he's back, I think he's working on some sort of transportation plan. And I'm trying not to solve every problem in the world myself anymore. So hopefully he can kind of do some of that, and I'll just give my opinion and be that. But yeah, anything else I can help with or anything, just, you know, let me know or provide for you.
Thank
Happy
you,
to.
Amy.
Okay. All right.
Thank you, Amy.
Thanks for having me. Have fun. Thank you.
All right. Area plan guidelines. Another hot topic. Did everybody get a chance to review those?
No,
No,
I did not.
did
Not
not
enough
either.
time? Okay, well,
Henry,
Leslie,
yo,
go ahead, Lee.
I read them. We've been operating under those guidelines from the very beginning. Therefore, they didn't come as a surprise to me, nor should it come as a surprise to the town area plan work group. Where the rub is two parts. By the way, Civic League Executive Committee talked about this just yesterday afternoon. So topic is fresh in my mind. One, there are areas that would like to be involved, but they've been told to wait because there isn't enough staff to have more than 1 or 2 work groups at a time. We happen to be in the slot, but there are others, and I think Monomoy is one of the issues that say, why may we not do our thing and then submit our plan? And so one is, are we a town subcommittee, in which case we have to follow all the rules, including open meeting law? Or may area plans be submitted voluntarily for the MP and EDC to either accept or reject as they choose? That's one. Two is even a simpler one. The state expected a master plan last year. It doesn't sound like we're going to get all of our area of small or local area plans together in any timely fashion. We're looking at January if we can. Does that mean that the commercial downtown would start after us? There's been no effort at organizing it. So one is, must it be a town function, or may areas submit voluntarily? And two, what does this do to the overall schedule?
Well,
So,
if you,
I'm going to jump in for just one thing. You made a statement that I think is false. You said that the state expected a master plan last year. I don't have any factual basis to believe that statement.
Our master plans must be renewed every 10 years, and
No.
we're 12 or 13.
It's not 10 years. It's not 10 years. You can see that in the master plan.
All right.
So there's a lot of misconception, and that's why I wanted to jump in.
But it's still going very slowly.
Granted.
Okay.
okay, I'm glad to see something in writing, because this is going on, what, 3 years? And things have been changed from when we began to where we are now. With something in writing, at least it gives the next group something to go by. Also, Lee, if you read through that again, any area can apply, but they've got to wait. It's up to NP and EDC as to when they start.
Henry, but that suggests that any area may apply, but they don't start work until they're authorized.
Correct.
As opposed to working on their own and submitting a plan for MP and EDC approval or rejection.
Right, and each group has an advisor. So you can start and do whatever you want, like I believe Surfside did, and then it was sent back.
Yeah.
They just don't, NP and EDC hasn't got the staff. It'd be nice if they did. I was kind of surprised that originally the Civic League was approached to help set this up. That's how we got involved. But in these guidelines, there's no mention of that. So I don't, is the town gonna advertise when they want an area?
Henry, I'm not sure you got the correct version. The 2020 letter from Judith Wegner is a part of these guidelines.
Well, I'm going by what Leslie sent me for us to review and
Yeah,
submit comments to her. And
Yeah,
that's not in there.
my apologies then, because it was supposed to be. Darn it.
Henry, were you a recipient of Mary Warrow's email from yesterday?
No, not yesterday.
Because she attached all of this material along with a Civic League response, which
No.
has been approved.
Yeah, I did not get it.
Okay, I'll do that. Mary, did you get it?
Hang on, Lee, I'm checking on something else and I will let you know in a minute.
And I just mentioned that I am lost. I don't even know what you guys are talking about at this point.
Yeah, so Henry, the email that you sent on September 27th with the area plan guidelines draft did include the 2020 letter from Judith Wegner that is attached. I mean, I'm opening it directly from your email.
Okay,
So that is the 7 pages that you sent out is the full guidelines. So just for clarification there, and it consists of 2 parts: the recent additional detail and the original 2020 letter. So
882, I've got it right here. I'm sorry.
but I recognize Marianne and Marcia are at a disadvantage for not having seen the document. So I'm representing the NPNEDC here, so I don't want to I don't want to have a conversation that should be had at the NPNEDC meeting. So I would encourage you to bring your comments and concerns to that meeting. We're anticipating this, the agenda is not set yet, that will be our October meeting.
Right. Leslie wanted these, our comments by the 19th.
Yeah.
Well, because we are authorized, we may comment on it, but we don't have a dog in this fight, as far as I understand what's going on. We may feel that the guidance that we've received is onerous, but we've been living under it.
Right. She just wanted us to review this.
We're coming from a different position from those areas that would like to be involved, but have been told they mayn't.
Right, but our objective right now is to review this and get comments back to Leslie before the 19th.
I don't have a lot to say, and we're living with it.
Well, I was glad to see something in writing,
Yeah.
because if you remember when we first started, it was the entire town association area. And then what, a year into it, it got whittled down, and then it got whittled down again.
I agree, Henry. There was no question that we were the test case, and as the then leadership in planning saw what was happening, things changed. Now it says we'll establish your boundaries, but they did do that for us.
Yes, they did.
It just took a while.
It evolved from a town area plan or town association area plan to a town area plan.
Right. Losing commercial downtown on the waterfront.
Right.
Primarily.
And do I need to understand why the Civic League is suddenly involved?
The Civic League was involved from the get-go and now they've been excluded, or I shouldn't say excluded, but there's nothing in writing about it.
I'm not following that statement, Henry.
Okay, NP
My
and
knowledge,
EDC
the
went to
intent
the
was-
Civic League 3 years ago, said we would like the associations to come up with area plans.
Okay.
Might have been 4 years
Let me
ago.
give an addendum to that.
Now, hey, Lee, before you do, so that is the 820 letter from Judith, signed by Judith Wegner and Nat Lowell and Andrew Vorse, that was included in the guidelines. I thought you were referencing right now, and I was going to say that
No.
the intent was for the NP and EDC to invite the Civic League, and if they hadn't been invited, I needed to know about that. So
They have been invited. That's what I was trying to say. The current status is that the Civic League has been invited. Material was distributed before the executive committee meeting, and at the executive committee meeting, a stance written by Mary Warrow and Associates was adopted. And the stance,
let's let them
you'll get
let them represent their stance, Lee. We're the town area plan work group. But to answer your earlier question, no, I have not received that.
Okay, it's only, as I say, only just approved yesterday afternoon. I thought about raising my hand and saying I recused myself. I just didn't grunt aye or nay. And so they think it passed unanimously.
Okay, Mary, have you got any comments on this? As a member of the work group?
I would agree that we have been living with these guidelines for the most part.
Yep. Do you see any changes that need to be made?
Well, I wrote a good bit of what's on here. So
Okay.
And based on the experience that I've had, but also just as background, other people contributed to it based on the experiences that they've had. And the intent here is that these will be helpful to the creation of area plans.
Yep, I agree.
Okay.
It would have been nice if we had had something like this when we started.
Yeah, I think that's part of what motivated me to write it down, is that it is helpful. And it's good to have things, that if you're enforcing something, it's good to have a written record of what you're enforcing.
Yes.
Yeah, I
Lee,
think
any comments?
Sorry, was that to me or to?
Yes. Any changes you'd like to see?
Not really.
Yeah, okay.
Because we're already operating under this, and I don't
Yes.
want to assess this document as if I were somebody else. In other words, if I were Monomoy or Surfside or whatever. It exists.
Yeah.
And we're working with it.
so. Since we've been speaking, I've opened the document and I've scrolled down through it. And in general, I don't find anything that, is contrary to what we've been working with. It sounds very familiar to me. And I don't have any issue with it. But I would add two things. One, in the very end of it, it lists questions to consider in deciding. It just goes under the different components of the master plan, and it has different questions to kind of spur on some exploration. And I wouldn't mind having a qualification to that, because in one way it felt to me like those were questions I needed to answer rather than, to consider, even though it's titled that way. It's kind of like when you get a survey and you go all through it, but it never asks you the question that you really want to answer. Do you know what I'm saying? The question in a survey, which just isn't.
I hate surveys for that very reason.
Because I feel so constrained, and I bring that up just because I feel that slight constraint with these questions here. And I know everybody is really different, but I really, really found it helpful to broaden my understanding by looking at off-island examples. And so to have some resources that are not set up to say, this is good, or this is a medium good one, but just to say, well, take a look at a few other coastal state communities and take a look at their area plans or their master plans, because it really helped me broaden out what kind of questions I wanted to consider beyond what we had. And I just think resources, when anybody starts to do what's essentially a research project, some other resources to give you an idea of how somebody else does it just would be helpful.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, I have
No,
409.
Henry, anything
Hi, Ray.
else with respect to the guidelines or old
Yes.
business? I have,
Well, guidelines.
I have 3 items of old business.
Okay,
First of all, I did say that as I was watching the video of the last meeting, I'm going, oh, no. Okay. Cemeteries. Newtown is outside of our district. The historic colored, Quaker, and New North are inside the district. New North is east of New Lane, closer to downtown. Old North, the former Gardner burial ground, is west and is outside of the district. Marcia's document has been duplicated faithfully, no change. During the discussion, she mentioned that there may be some amendments. And those were part of what I sent to her just to be helpful. But then I got to the section where she talked about fertilizer. And here's where I made the mistake. I let her know that I didn't agree with the statement in there, and that's a discussion. So Henry, at some point, we need to reopen the discussion on accepting fertilizer regulations for Nantucket. Because the document that Marcia wrote said that we should ban them. And I'm contrarily minded to that. Controlled, yes. I spent 2 years of my life working on the fertilizer application best management plan, which I encourage people to read before we discuss this again. So I think we're holding, because of the timing, I think we're holding fertilizer to another day. But I'm giving you notice on that.
yeah, I don't think you'll ever see a ban.
So
But since that topic is not on the agenda, what would be
Mary,
the suggestion?
the state has locked in local fertilizer regulations, and what exists. There may be no amendments under state law. That's why the town of Nantucket has a home rule petition suggesting that we reopen our rules to make them better, but not to eliminate. But Henry's right. There can be no change until the state permits. Leaving that aside, I think the discussion is best held when we have a little more time. Mary,
Agreed.
is that okay with you?
I was going to say, since that discussion is not on our agenda, that's probably something we should hold off. So I was agreeing with you, Lee.
Well, it was on the agenda for the last meeting. That's why it's old business. Okay, but I still think it needs a deeper discussion and should be an agenda item. I agree. My other issue is something that we've been talking about today, and I think at some point our recommendation for the town area is that we change the use chart to allow certain elements of retail to be permitted by special permit, accessory use, SP. there is a category for that in the use chart. It doesn't exist for our area. And you'll see that as soon as you open up the chart, which I'll copy into the minutes. So
If you go back a couple of years, Lee, when Leslie was going over the zoning to familiarize us,
Yeah.
I believe she said that on a case-by-case basis, like a home shop was allowable, but it's
Yeah,
strictly
well,
case by case.
home businesses are allowable. I said retail. That would be,
Apologize.
so something like Flock is pre-existing non-conforming. Because the building was in Commerce, and when Nantucket Bake left, Flock moved in before. It's the use, not the brand. So the use was retail. It stays as retail. That's okay, because they moved in very quickly. Whereas if we wanted to open a delicatessen at Rabimbus, Fahey, and Fromagerie, we couldn't because they lost that use. It's now residential. All right.
Okay,
So I'm not interested in something called spot rezoning because the town doesn't like that either. And I think this is something to be held for yet another agenda item, but I am giving notice. I think this is something important to our attitude about keeping our area vital. I commend Jane Jacobs, whatever the book is, Life and Death of American Cities, where she says it's got to be vital. Okay. Oh, parking. I think we need to revisit that. And I think the appropriate way is when Mary and I come up with a fashioned report on circulation. If she agrees with me, it'll come forward. If she doesn't, then it would not be in our report, but I might offer it up single-handedly.
okay.
Okay.
I also want to note for the minutes that Reagan was able to join us at 3:58.
I missed that. Thank you.
Sorry, I time zone challenged. I'm an hour off. I apologize.
Okay. All right, anything else? I have 4:07. Motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn. Mary Ann.
Okay. Second,
Mary, second.
Mary, thank you. Okay, we're out of here.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Sorry, guys.
Hi.
Bye.